Something you always hear throughout life is previous generations talking about your generation and the generations that have come after them just not getting it and not being as good as previous generations, not being as smart as previous generations, what have you. It's what our great grandparents, parents' generations have said about us. Funny thing is, as we go along, that's what we'll be saying about future generations that come after us, our kids, grandkids, and if we're lucky enough, our great grandkids, so on and so forth. And it kind of is that disconnect, that lack of communication between generations, that lack of understanding, because it's not always accurate. What happens a lot of times is previous generations are stuck in a mindset of the way things used to be, and they've become comfortable to them, become accustomed to them, and therefore they think that's the way that things always should be. Whereas younger generations may understand to a certain degree better what is currently going on and understand better what the current environment and climate is. Doesn't always make this generation wrong. Most certainly doesn't always make this generation right. But that's always something you're going to see. Back in the day, it was better. Things were different when I was a kid. You hear this when we talk about, you know, older generations and how their parents disciplined them and how strict they were. Okay, yeah, because that worked so fucking well when you were out there doing all types of drugs during the fucking 60s and 70s. Yeah, I mean, if you look at like in my case, my parents' and grandparents' generations, I could sit there and say, well, to be fair, you guys were fucking knuckleheads. You guys were morons. So don't sit there and try to tell me how superior things were back in the day. Oh, my generation makes all types of bastard babies. Well, you fuckers did too. The difference being is that when y'all did it in the back seat of your cars on fucking Hookup Mountain, you were like 16, you would get married immediately, and then 7 pounds later, you'd have an 11-pound baby girl or baby boy. They were just big, premature, and big bone. So get the fuck out of here with that shit. I hate when older generations will sit there and say that about younger generations, and I try to prevent myself from saying that about younger generations, even though as I get older, I do say it more and more, and I feel bad when I do sometimes, because realize just how ridiculous I sound, and I realize just how ridiculous it sounds a lot of times when I hear previous generations that came before me say this type of garbage. So as I'm listening to and watching Vince McMahon on Steve Austin's podcast on the WWE Network, when he referenced the fact that he doesn't think the millennials, frankly, get it, and they don't have the drive and ambition to succeed, and that they fail to possess that characteristic of wanting to take chances and take risks, that they're too afraid to fail, and they're too afraid to try and grab the brass ring. To me, it just came across as grumpy grandpa having a total disconnect with the current reality and the environment of the times, and an environment, frankly, that he helped fucking create. How dare Vince McMahon sit there and say that millennials don't have the drive and ambition, that they're afraid to fail, that this and that, and just basically putting all of the blame on the younger generation of talent, wrestlers, sports entertainers, if you will, in the company, for their inability to get through that kind of glass ceiling and become big-time stars and become big-time moneymakers for both themselves and the WWE. What a ridiculous notion and assertion this is. And I hope nobody actually buys into and believes this bullshit when it comes to a WWE perspective, first of all. And the toxic, creative cesspool environment of the WWE, how the fuck is anybody not named John Cena, Triple H, or Randy Orton, frankly, ever going to become a big-time star? I mean, let's be perfectly realistic here. It's not like the current creative environment and the current environment of the business as a whole lends itself to a lot of chances for a lot of these so-called millennials, these younger guys that Vince seems to think are the biggest problem with the fucking wrestling business today. If you're sitting there and you're a wrestler in your mid or late 20s and you go to the WWE, you know more often than not you're probably going to be saddled with a shitty name, a shitty gimmick, be giving a shitty, inconsistent push, shitty character development, and then eventually you will get a shitty D-push and a shitty burial and a shitty de-emphasis and a shitty future endeavor. That's the fucking way it goes. And when Vince sits there and says that these guys are afraid to take risks and take chances and they're afraid to fail, no, they're not, because frankly, once they get to the WWE main roster, they have to operate under the assumption that they are going to fail because of the bullshit of people like Vincent K. McMahon. There is no fear of failure. There is an acceptance of failure because they know primarily that's what the fuck is going to happen. This whole notion of people not wanting to take risks, well, in the WWE, if you're not taking the type of risk that the WWE wants, they're going to fucking bury you. And in a lot of cases, if they do speak out, if they do stand up for themselves, and they do take risks, what does the WWE do? The exact thing that Chris Jericho and other morons like him deny the WWE ever does, that is intentionally sabotage individuals. You speak out about something that you don't like about the company, buried. You fuck up a move wrong one time in a match, buried. You tried to do something that was a little bit off the script on a totally scripted, watered-down, corporately structured product. And what happens? Buried. How the fuck is Vince McMahon going to sit there in any good faith or conscience in a product that is so incredibly scripted, from the promos to the matches to everything, that he's going to sit there and have the nerve, the gall, the nuts, the cojones, to sit there and accuse people of being afraid to take risks and take chances when your own fucking structure is set up to prevent just that? How are you going to sit there and accuse people of being afraid to fail when there is no incentive for trying to reach for that brass ring, knowing that you won't be given that full opportunity because you're at the mercy of somebody else's fucking whim, and in this case it's the whim of a 69-year-old senile ass, out-of-touch CEO. We're going to get mad at these guys for being afraid to fail. Again, they're not afraid to fail. They know that in the WWE with their character, for the most part, it's going to end up a failure. That they've been hired to eventually either leave or be future endeavor. These guys don't want to take risks. You don't give them the opportunity to take risks. You don't give them the chance to take risks. And then when they do maybe veer off the scripting, they do take those risks, you punish them and bury them as a result. When Austin asked Vince about, maybe these guys are afraid to piss him off, and then when they piss him off, they get in trouble, and Vince is like, well, don't piss us off. No, maybe that's exactly what the fuck these guys do need to do. Because you're sitting there on the one hand saying these guys don't stand up for themselves, they don't have ambition, they don't have that passion and desire, they're afraid to take risks, they're afraid to fail. But then, if they come at you and say, no, this is stupid, no, you're a fucking moron, no, you are out of touch, no, you don't have a damn clue, this makes no fucking sense, this is what we should do, you punish and bury him for it. And the whole time Vince is sitting there, when he's talking about this particular subject, it really legitimately seemed like he was laying the lion's share of the blame squarely at the feet of the younger talent in the WWE for the failure of the company to create new stars and for the failure of these young talents to become stars themselves. I don't give a damn how good these talents are or how bad these talents are. I don't give a damn how much the fans want to like these guys or want to hate these guys. They are in an environment in the WWE where it eliminates any and all ambition. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you get over, no matter how good you're going to be, you're never going to be the number one guy as long as John Cena's there. Ask CM Punk how that works out. Frankly, ask Daniel Bryan how that works out. Ask so many other fucking guys that have never been in a program with John Cena that aren't part of the Breakfast Club how the fuck that works out. You're in an environment that rewards failure and mediocrity. You're in an environment that penalizes ambition, that restricts your ability to even take a risk, so therefore you don't want to take it. You create an environment where people can't speak out for fear of their fucking jobs and their careers. And you're going to blame those people? Again, this is the CEO of the WWE. This is not some ham and egger creative writer. This is not some disgruntled former wrestler. This is not some asshat like me saying this shit. This is the guy that runs the fucking company. This is the guy that has owned the company for over 30 damn years now, saying this ridiculously boneheaded dumb shit. Vince, the problem is not the millennials. The problem is your treatment of the millennials. The problem is not the ambition of these younger wrestlers, sports entertainers, talents, superstars, whatever the fuck you want to call them. It's the environment that you place these young superstars into. It is your treatment of those young superstars. It is your lack of patience with these young superstars with your increasing age. Again, when you look at the roster of the WWE today, it's not the greatest talent roster of all time, but it's most certainly not the worst. There are individuals you could look at and say, this guy's got talent. This guy can do this guy can do that. There's actually some decent talent on the show, but they are in an environment that stifles them. They are in an environment where they're not allowed to shine. They are in an environment that from the jump street, you can sit there and say, no matter how good you're going to be, you're never going to get to this level. You'll have to settle for this. You're teaching them from the very beginning they have to fucking settle. Why would they sit there and want to reach for anything more when it's already been clearly established that they can't get anything more? Again, this is just a typical corporate CEO talking. Blame everything else, blame all the other conditions, do everything except blame your fucking self and the company that you're fucking in charge of. The millennials aren't the problem. Vince McMahon is the fucking problem.